back, everybody, to another episode of Digitalk Arkitechs. Today we have Dan Anthony with us. Dan, welcome to the show. Please tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invite. My name is Dan. I have been working in IT and cybersecurity for a little over 20 years. I just started out building media servers and streaming machines for a company that built in-home streaming solutions. That was where I got started. Eventually, I worked my way into cybersecurity, and currently I'm working and doing audit. It's really enjoyable for those of us that are in it, and for everybody else, it's highly boring, and that's just fine. I enjoy it, but on the side, I love talking about cyber, and whether that's podcasting or public speaking, it's all game.
Awesome. So you've been in cybersecurity and auditing for quite some time. What originally pulled you into this space, and what keeps you passionate about it?
Oh, originally was with that media company. We would build, this is in 2008, 2009. We were building 13 terabyte RAID 6 for my nerds in the group, 13 terabyte RAID 6 servers. And those were streaming, 1080p. It was high def at the time. We're streaming to some smaller media decks that we were also building. So somebody would build a 13 by the server, and then they'd buy 5 or 6 media decks to stream. And we were putting all of this together with commercial off-the-shelf parts. So anybody could go down to Best Buy, Walmart, your local mom and pop computer shop, and you could buy all of the parts that we used as components. So getting all of those parts to work together in a solution that acted like an aftermarket solution, right? Like it was all integrated, was non-negotiable, right? We couldn't have blue screens. We couldn't have overheating issues, things like that. It couldn't look like a Windows box in any way, shape.
Has to be smooth.
Yeah. It had to look like it was all integrated and like that from the beginning. And so I got to put together a lot of those images and those baselines. And that usually took a week or two of pretty heavy testing, making sure all the drivers and the firmware and everything played together right. So great, right? We get those working. We would start shipping out a new model. And within months after me taking over those roles, I started seeing those units coming back, right? Being returned to us. And it wasn't because of anything, right? It wasn't a software problem in the sense that I had screwed up the firmware or whatever. It was malware. Right. There were viruses on them. People were using these media computers to do just browsing of the web. Right.
Oh, no.
Your end users always figure out a way. And so there were a lot of people that figured out a way to do browsing, and we hadn't locked it down as we should have. So I learned a lot when I was getting those machines back. And I just said, okay, we got to invest more time and more effort in security. And that was what got me started in just locking down permissions, and then that led to the next job of, hey, now let's look into this and XYZ, and eventually it led into audit, and here we are. Yeah.
Okay, so in the course of all of that, you've come up with some business ideas. One of them, if I remember correctly, was around tracking customer movements, right?
Right.
Tell us about that experience and how that kind of the intersection of data privacy and the business opportunity that came with it.
This is probably about 2010-ish, 2010, 2011. I was working on wrapping up my master's degree, and in one of the classes we were talking about IP addresses. I went to the University of Utah, so I got to represent. Yeah, go Utes. And so we were talking about IP addresses. And in that class at the University of Utah was one of the original, 5 or half a dozen universities that got together with the other universities to build the original internet. So at the U, any student that was logged on, right, that had a laptop and was connected to Wi-Fi had their own IP address. It was not natted, right? There was nothing but, right? You had your own because the U just grabbed an entire, I think it was, if I remember right, it was a class A. Like they had millions of IP addresses. And so we were talking
Back
about
then
that.
when they were available.
Right. Cause in the
Right.
is on ARPANET, right? Nobody cared. So, right, everybody
No.
grabbed a bunch. And the U still had them. And we talked about that. While we were talking about that in my class, it occurred to me, hey, that's a way that people could be tracked. And I had seen it on networks and locally before, but it occurred to me, hey, on Wi-Fi, if I had access to that kind of data, that would be easy enough. And part of one of the security classes involved a Wi-Fi pineapple, which is if you're at work, don't look this device up on any of your work networks. Your IT teams will maybe
We'll
come
freak
asking
out.
questions. Yeah. But a Wi-Fi pineapple is a off-the-shelf device that can spoof wireless SSIDs. Right. So anybody's phone can immediately try to connect to it thinking it's their home network or it's their work network. And so it's a really easy way to get usernames, passwords. If you hook the Wi-Fi pineapple up to a network, then whoever's connecting up to you is none the wiser, right? Because they're connected to the internet and they think everything's great and you have a man in the middle device. Right. Commercial. I mean, it's off the shelf. It's an incredible device. And I saw that and I said, there's a way that I could use that, not
Do you own one?
maliciously. I do not. I wanted to get one, but I said, I'm not going to go this direction. And I kind of figured I could put one together using a Raspberry Pi and a few other parts myself, but no need. At any rate, I looked at it and I said, if I had just little Wi-Fi listening devices, I could track an IP address. And so since nobody in the world shuts their Wi-Fi off when they leave their house, right? Maybe seven people, right? Maybe 7 people in the entire world do this, right? I figured if I have a listening device at the bowling alley and a listening device at the ice cream shop, I can tell them who goes bowling and then gets ice cream. Or I can tell them that, people go bowling and they're there for 2 hours and then they go to the ice cream shop for 30 minutes. And that would be valuable information for those businesses. And I had no method of reverse engineering or tracking down anybody's data, right? It's like sitting in the parking lot and looking at license plates. I can look at license plates all day and I can tell you who's parked where, or where they're going to buy things, but I can't tell you who belongs to that license plate. And for me, that was where that line of privacy was drawn was, I can track where an individual phone is going. I can follow it, but I never knew who it was exactly. And so for my part, that was where it came down to, okay, privacy is built in just because I didn't have that capability.
Okay.
But yeah, it was fun. It was an enjoyable.
Did it go anywhere?
As I was getting it off of the ground, both Google and Apple rolled out MAC address anonymization and masking features in both of their operating systems. And so at that point, I saw the update come through on my phone at the time. And I just said, the only way I could possibly make this work now is if I get people to download an app. And I have never been a developer of any kind. I can make Hello World in BASIC and Java, and that's it. And so at that point was where I just
find Python much more easy to do.
Right? Yes.
You picked Java?
Well, I mean, in 2010, right?
I hated Java.
Yes. Java was one of the classes at the U that we got to take. I know,
I took it.
Awful. Yeah.
Yep.
Few things made me want to give up computers entirely.
That
like
was
Java.
One. I agree.
But
at same
that point,
feeling here.
Yeah. They rolled out with those privacy protections, and at that point, I was basically out of money and out of motivation to keep pushing on this thing. And it could have been great, but also at the same time, I found out that the likes of Walmart and Target had much more sophisticated systems in place that weren't just tracking, right? They weren't just tracking MAC addresses on phones, but they were also tracking a face through a store. And I don't know if at the time they had that matched up to payment cards, right, being
Hmm.
used at checkouts and such, but I understand that came later. And I just said, I am so far behind that, yeah, at that point, it was more worth it to me to go back and get a paycheck from someone else than try and keep pushing.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so let's get to the cybersecurity and audit auditing that you do, because I think the value here is small businesses, which is who we talk to regularly. Me as a business, obviously, and the people that watch and listens to this podcast. And one of the things that's very common with small and medium business owners is that they usually assume that they're too small to be targeted. What are you actually seeing on the ground when it comes to cyber risk for SMBs?
It's Nobody's too small. Definitely nobody is too small. I think just about everybody knows a grandma or grandpa or cousin or aunt or uncle or someone that's been targeted by a scam call from some call center, right? Or that they've had a pop-up that said, call this number. And yeah, it
Your
doesn't
Windows
matter.
system is at risk and you're on a Mac.
That's right. And you need to call this phone number Jonathan from a place that doesn't sound like Jonathan as his name will help you. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so everyone is a target. Like if you can, we're talking about people that go after grandma for $50 gift cards. Your small
Yep.
business is a target. Uh, and so the first thing I always look at is the lowest hanging fruit for any small business. And I just say, look, if your business has a network, if you have anything that's connected to the web, that's first line of
Mm.
defense, is just make sure you have a really great firewall set up. If you don't have a website or you don't have anything, if you have no reason for traffic to be coming into your network, then absolutely throw that thing on its most restrictive settings and just tell it to go nuts, drop everything, block everything, and from the inside, right? For your experience, that it shouldn't change much, but yeah, if there's no reason for anybody to come in, then that way there's no automatic programs that crawl the web and just
Bots.
knock. Right, no bots knocking on every IP address that come from Russia, China, North Korea. I can name the top suspects. The United States,
Russia, China,
Russia, China,
North
North
Korea,
Korea,
India.
India. United States is also, we have a lot of that going on here that
Hmm.
originates from us. But yeah, I mean there's a handful. And what's fun is to look at if you work in banking, it's called the OFAC website, where they have a list of about 34 countries where the United States State Department says we don't do any financial business with these countries, period.
Hmm.
And so a lot of times I was able to match up those. At the time, it was about 33, 34 countries. And I just said, okay, if we can't do business with these countries, block them.
Hmm.
Right. Our firewall should just straight out block anything that we know is coming from there. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's the lowest hanging fruit.
yeah. So because we host and build websites, we have to do a lot of that. One of the things we do almost every time we set up a website is we block primarily Russia and China off the top. Like,
Right out of the gate.
yep. And then depending on the business, we'll block, well, sorry, Russia, China, and North Korea. Those
Yep.
are always blocked. And then depending on the business, because we have to be mindful that we do a lot of business now with other regions, India comes in, like, all of that section of the world. And sometimes, honestly, we have had to go to streams because some of the businesses we've worked with are like sensitive to attacks. And so we go
All right.
completely the opposite. We go, okay, so which ones do we actually want traffic from only? And
Right.
so we just flip the switch the other way. So block everything but,
Yes.
let's say block everything but Canada, US, UK, Australia. And because we're serving them, I usually leave a couple of South American countries open. That's it. Everybody else gets completely blocked.
Yes.
Because it's easier to select the ones you want in than it is to select
Much.
all the ones you want out. And when it's that kind of business, it's just easier to just do 5 allowed than the
Yes.
other way around. It's crazy.
And
It's
much,
crazy because then
much
you
more
get
secure. Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, oh, I'm trying to access your website, but it's not loading. I'm like, where are you right now? Because that might be a problem.
Are you in Cuba? Yeah. Are you in?
Sadly, then you still get the ones using, VPNs and other
Right.
methods to still get through. So,
Yeah.
but at least the less sophisticated ones you're catching fairly early.
Yeah. The low hanging fruit is easy. And if you're a small business that's using an MSP, right, an IT, a managed service provider, this is the sort of stuff that they should be very well versed in, and they
Yep.
should have access to be able to say, look, yeah, we can whitelist the United States, Canada, we can whatever countries, but we can also unwrap a little bit of that traffic, right? And we'll be able to see it's coming from the United States, but it's coming from this VPN provider, and
Less likely to
and
be
be able to
legit.
right. And so, yeah, if you're working with an MSP, which I would always recommend, right, it doesn't matter what
Hmm.
you're doing in life, work with an expert, right?
And
So
honestly,
yeah,
same with it's not just MSPs. Like, I mean, yes, MSPs, but if you're working in our case, we're marketing, but we deal with websites and all of, make sure that whoever you're dealing with is also being diligent. You know how many times we've
exactly.
come to a website that has no security whatsoever. It's still all set up as default. And you go,
Right. Exactly. Yes.
and then they come and it's like, oh, my website just got hijacked. I'm like, well, and then I had one that was really funny
Shocker.
actually. So yeah, so it was a really old website. So they hadn't redesigned this website in quite some time, or redone at all, and it was already hard to load it because it was so old and so weird. And then one day he calls me in a hurry. He's like, since we're already thinking of doing all of this redesign and all of, can you like our website is down. We don't know what's wrong with it. I'm like, well, clearly it's bye-bye website. It's like, can you put a quick website together for me, at least temporarily? I'm like, I can put a temporary page up, but anyways, couldn't find the website, couldn't restore it, couldn't do any. So all we were left with just putting up a landing page saying a new website is coming, and then put in a new hosting and doing everything from scratch.
From scratch. Yeah.
Because there is, sometimes just there is no point. Like there is no
Yeah.
point trying to recover a really old website that it's all outdated anyways. But people just don't understand that it's not even just about the looks, or it's when it's outdated, it's so easy to get hacked.
Yes.
When you do not do proper maintenance on your technology, it's just so easy to get hacked. And a lot of people don't understand, when we talk to them about like a refresher, it's not just the looks, it's how it all behaves, right?
Yeah. Back end is important. How it all talks together.
Okay. So we're talking about like the low hanging fruit in the small business, medium sized business scenario. But of the things that when you're doing your audits, what are the highest impact and low effort security upgrades for most businesses that can, make an impact right away?
Well, the awful answer is depends on the business, right? It depends on what you're doing. Taking just 10 minutes to do a quick risk assessment. If I'm a small business, I'm a small business running a little retail shop in, let's say, Meeteetse, Wyoming, which about 30 people have maybe heard of Matiti, right? It is a tiny, tiny town versus doing a small shop on just off Broadway in New York,
Hmm.
right? In one shop, I'm going to say having an open access Wi-Fi with no password is not going to be a very big deal versus the one in New York where I'm going to say, if you've got open access Wi-Fi, you're going to find out why it's going to be a big deal for you, right?
Hmm.
When some neighbor is downloading illegal things at 2 a.m. on your Wi-Fi and you're the one becoming liable for it.
Hmm.
But yeah, from a 10-minute risk assessment really can tell you if you're not a technical business, right? If you're in a business that has zero to do with IT or tech, it really can be worth it to just have a 30-minute call with an MSP or with somebody who works in the industry, even if it's a friend from college. You just call them up and say, "Hey, this is what I've got," and you know what? And 9 times out of 10, they're going to come back with things like don't share passwords, don't reuse passwords, enable multi-factor everywhere you can. And I know in security, we all sound like a broken record, right? Until people start doing all of these things with passwords and MFA, then we're going to keep harping about it.
I remember when we were talking when we first met, you talk about um things like separate networks
Oh yeah.
upgrading, like when we're talking businesses,
Mhm.
separate networks upgrading payment systems, simple fixes so critical to and so risky, right?
Right. Yeah, that one is partly that is compliance, which yes, I work in compliance now, so I'm the hammer that sees nails everywhere. It's all compliance. But there is a thing that it's slowly been getting better over about the last 5-10 years, but it's not a government compliance thing. It's Visa, MasterCard, Discover, pretty much everybody except American Express all got together and they said, we don't want any government to be interfering with our businesses. So they made their own compliance standard, and
Okay.
that's PCI. And so for a long time, you would go in and as a small business owner, if there was fraud that occurred on somebody's credit card, Visa would just come in and say, okay, no, don't worry about it. We got it covered. We'll refund them. Right. They just took care of it. And eventually those numbers stopped making sense. And Visa via PCI, they started to, it's part of the agreement. So if you have a card terminal,
Hmm.
and you can only slide your card. So I would walk into a gas station and I would try to insert my card and they would say, no, we don't do that. And I would try to tap my card and they would say, no, we don't do that. And I would say, you know that if there's fraud that happens and this business or this terminal that is declared a point of interest, it starts at 10 grand. At the time, it was 10 grand just as a truck roll fee for Visa to get an investigative team or person out there to investigate the fraud. Because there was a point where Visa just said, no, we're done with all of this automatic reimbursement refunds. We're done taking care of that. It costs too much money. And if mom and pop shop didn't have chip and pin enabled, right? Or they didn't have tap if it was still a slide. They said, no, you're not compliant. And not only are we not going to cover that refund, you get to pay for us to bring this forensic analyst to your shop and
Oh
the
no,
person who's going to, right. And so that was about 10 or 15 years ago that changed. And right, very slowly, I've seen mom and pop where I can
everybody
go
got
in and
on.
yeah,
Yeah.
people are finally slowly getting there. But yeah, so that's one thing where I would just say a lot of businesses would just look at it and they say, no, it's extra money to enable chip and pin. It's an extra money to enable tap. And at that point is where I always say, make sure you're reading the legal agreement because yeah, it's extra money, but also it's less risk for you in the end. And that's part of it. Another part of it that I recall with PCI specifically is if you have a POS terminal, right, just a point of sale where you are accepting money, and then you have 5 other computers at work. And if they're all on the same network and that point of sale is determined to be a initiator of fraud, then when an analyst comes into your business, they're not just looking at that point of sale computer because you have 5 other computers that are all on that same network, right? So what was a $10,000 fee just got X'd by 5 machines that are on that network. So a really low-hanging fruit that I
Crazy.
recommend, right? Awful, right? Right. What do those other machines have to do with it? They're going to find out, right? That nothing, maybe it was nothing. Maybe one of those machines was the point of, right, the pivot point.
Mm.
But yeah, a really easy low-hanging fruit for a lot of businesses is I actually have one right. This is an old router that I have, and everybody knows that you plug in to, right, this one goes to the internet, and then the rest are my network. But what happens if you plug in your WAN port onto one of the regular switch ports on another machine, on another router, right? So if I have a router on my main business network, and then I just buy one of these and I run that like it's going into a new network, this creates a separate network, right? So if I just put my point of sale
So if you
machines
take that router, that other
and
machine, and you plug it into the yellow one here, let's call it color coded, into
right,
the yellow here, this is a new network now.
new network. And so if I only plug in my POS machines on this switch right here, the black ports, right? Then suddenly what would have been 5 machines considered as part of that truck roll, and Visa's going to want to check all of that out. It's only going to be the machines that are plugged into that switch, right? Only on this router. And so easy way and
To isolate traffic.
to isolate everything on a separate network and say all of my PCI stuff is on one network. So if anything ever does happen,
Okay, so you
it's all
have
segregated.
let's say you have your internet router
Right.
that the internet comes into. And
Mhm.
you take one cable from that internet router into this yellow
Yep.
switch
Straight. Yep.
to here, and that's a
New
separate
network.
network now.
Separate network.
Okay.
Yep. And that's that. You still are relying on your internet router to do the firewall, and that's your main point of protection. So with this one, I don't care as much. I shouldn't, right? I'm going to lose my cybersecurity card for saying this, right? I don't care as much that this is a brand new
Because you have the
router with
other
all the
one.
latest, right? Because the other one is doing that the initial firewall, the initial blocking. And so this one is all I'm doing is just getting a separate network.
Well, here goes a question for you. Speaking of routers, and I know we're getting a little technical, but I think a lot of people don't even realize the risk, right? So most people get internet from a service provider, right? And most of them give you the standard modem, and these modems nowadays come, pretty much set up. They come, they put it in, and they tell you just leave it. It
Yeah,
has
don't touch it.
everything you
Yeah.
need. How much of that is true? Just leave it, or if you're a business, do you just leave it, or do you need to be more diligent? If you are, say, I'm a, and I mean, for the sake of examples, like, say, this is my business, right? So I have my service provider modem, right? That I just plug into it, right? And I'm assuming, I mean, I think it's a fair assumption. It's most business would do that, right? Where if
Right.
you're a small business, a couple of computers will just go straight to the internet service provider modem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
It's easy.
go.
It works.
It
Right?
works, yeah.
Yeah, it works. And that's all we think about is that, right, it just works. And if those machines are not PCI, right? If they're not taking payments, I don't feel bad about that. If you have one machine that is taking payments and then the rest don't necessarily need to be on that same network, then that's where I say, okay, grab an older router, throw something like that in. For most, at least for what I've seen in the last couple years, the likes of Google Fiber and Xfinity, Time Warner have started to really lock down their routers when they are bringing them in. So it used to be that you would either have access to change a lot of things on those,
Mm-hmm.
or they would just they would just set it up
Preset.
and right, it would be preset, kind of open. Uh, but a lot of those, I know a lot of those service providers now, they just say, no, 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 we don't want you to get hacked. So don't mess with the router. We will do security updates on it. We will make sure it's locked down. And the only way we're
Mm-hmm.
going to open it up is if you specifically request for ports to be open, or if you are
So it's fair.
specifically asking.
So it's fair to say that nowadays it's somewhat safe to
It's
just
safe.
leave
Yeah,
them.
safer than it was, but always, especially if you have an MSP, or if you have if you have somebody who comes in and works on your computers one day a month, right, or does it
Right.
on call, easily that's worth it. Hey, can you check the settings and just tell me if this is locked down, or if there's anything we would need to worry about, or right, anything like that. Most of the time it'll be fine, but always
Okay.
worth a second set of eyes.
Okay. Beautiful. So, from your perspective, where are small and mid-sized business most exposed today without even realizing it? Not leaving the modem out of the equation now because we just talked about that. But
We hit that a lot.
and I guess the point of payment, right?
The point is right, point of sale ish, even more than modems in the point of sale. It's yeah, it all comes down to risk. If you have 10, right, if you have 10 employees,
Mm-hmm.
I hate throwing out statistics without citations. So there's my huge banner of I have no statistic to back this up. But right, let's say, right, 10% of people or 5% of people, right? You have 20 employees, then at least one of them is going to be doing something that maybe is not in the best interest of the business. And so, right, it's a risk calculation. It's almost a numbers game of where do I decide I've got 5 people who work in my shop and we all have the same admin username and password that we log in to the computer with, right? I get twitchy at even just talking about that, because as a compliance person, I go, no, 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 everybody needs their own username and their own password to have the logging in place on machines, so that if somebody does do something, maybe they're not even malicious, right? Maybe somebody added an extra zero or forgot a zero at the point of sale. And if they don't have an individual login, you may not have a
We don't know.
method of knowing who it was, right? That
Mm-hmm.
just made a hundreds or a thousands rounding error, right? Totally, yeah, totally not intentional, right? But right, a
But an error
training,
nonetheless, right?
an error that just cost you in the hundreds or the thousands because it right, just fat fingered a zero. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, having unique usernames and passwords for all of your people is not just a method of right, keep the bad guys out. It's a method of and keeping logging on, right? It's a method
Mm-hmm.
of keeping track of who has done what and being able to verify. Uh, and a lot of times with passwords, people just go, "Oh, I already have too many passwords." And easy, right? With Mac, you have Face ID. Windows has Hello Face, or for $15, you go to Best Buy or Walmart and buy a fingerprint reader, right? It doesn't have to be Fort Knox. Right? I like using 30 plus character long passwords that are randomized. And that's what I
Teddy.
use, right? I'm into it. I use a password manager, right, to do all of that, and I let that take care of it. But right, I get that people aren't into that, and they're not, right. People go, I don't have that kind of time. Easy to just do a password that's tied to your fingerprint on almost any Windows machine, with a
Mac too.
$15 fingerprint reader. Yeah, 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 easy to set up, and then boom, you have the auditing, you have the logging. So if somebody has a weird account, or if there's right a training issue that comes up, you immediately know who it is. So that's yeah, I like that tracking, I like that logging for both directions.
Yeah, I agree. That's all right. So let's talk about getting into these, we've talked about security, data tracking, and now let's mix all of it into one conversation that makes sense to us, which is what should business owners think about balancing marketing data, personalization, and customer privacy without crossing that fine line into creepy business, right?
Oh, I'm not sure I'm the right person to draw that line, but that will not stop me from taking a stab at it. My favorite story, true story involving this data is from Target. It was 10, this is easily over 10, 15 years ago, so pre-2010, that the story goes that Target sent a targeted advertisement to a home for diapers and, baby wipes and things of that nature. And the next day, a very irate man came in to the local Target and yelled at the manager because his wife was right. He and his wife had been done having kids for a long time, and the only person in his home capable was his teenage daughter. And you people are something else. And
Mhm.
as the story goes, that weekend, the same man showed up apologizing to the store manager, saying, I had a talk with my daughter and realized there were things going on in my house I didn't realize were going on, and she's
Oh, no.
due in about 7 months. And
Wow.
Target knew
Mhm.
because of their data analytics. They saw the sudden shift from scented lotions to unscented lotions, from scented can't they saw this sudden shift, and there was a while that Target was saying, yeah, we can tell you within about 4 weeks.
Mhm.
They could tell just by purchase trends. They could tell how far along pregnancies were. And
That's
right
crazy.
right wild,
Crazy scary.
crazy and scary when it was used in that manner. But also,
Mhm.
if that's the situation you're in and you really need some coupons for diapers, awesome, right?
Yes.
You got this,
Agree.
great. What a great thing. So
They know.
yeah, yeah,
They're
it
giving
can,
me already the discount.
right? So yeah, where's the line? And there's a lot of times I like to complain about how Wild West a lot of the privacy laws are in the United States. But I don't know too many people besides myself that actually read the terms and conditions. Whether I'm
Do you
buying a
actually read
car,
them?
I when I'm not reading them, I'm at least skimming them. But yeah, whether I'm signing up on a website, whether I'm buying a car, whatever it is, I try to at least look at all the highlights and go through them real quick. I have annoyed more than a few used car salesmen with my, no, no, no. You're asking me to sign 7 pages. I'm going to at least skim through this. And there have been times where there's have been things that I've looked at and I've said, I don't agree to this. Right. We got to figure this out because this is not okay.
Mhm.
But it's all in those agreements, right? When you are
Mhm.
shopping somewhere and using their customer loyalty program, right? Terms and
Yeah.
conditions apply, right? And that is part of those terms and conditions, is that you are telling
And
them,
then
yeah,
there's that long
you
page that pops up at the bottom. You don't
yeah,
click on it, but
yeah,
you should,
yeah,
because you're like clicking the box that says I agreed to it, and then there's
right.
the link, but nobody opens that link,
No, but
and that
yeah,
link goes to a page that has like a novel worth of reading. But
yes,
hey, we live in a world with AI. So for most people, my recommendation, I don't know yours, is open the page and just copy the content and ask the AI, whichever one you're using, if there's anything to be concerned about in that,
yeah.
you
Get
know.
the synopsis. Yeah. No,
Yep.
that's a great
No,
idea.
just
That's
ask.
yeah,
I do it. Now,
yeah,
I don't have time to read all of this, but hey, ChatGPT or whichever, like it doesn't matter which one you're using. Just copy the content and said,
yep,
within these terms and conditions, is there anything I should be concerned about? And most likely, it's going to give you an answer that would tell you, well, there is this part. Did you
right,
agree to it or not? Because you might want to review it, and then you
yep,
at least know.
yes,
And you know on the note of AI with AI, it comes up on every one of my shows.
Always.
I choose to include it because it's such an important part of our current state. We talk about AI every day. We use AI every day. I think most people now just use for, even if it's just for one quick consultation, or if you're already typing it into Google, it's going to show you an
Right.
answer. So
Yeah.
it's embedded in our lives. We can't do anything about it anymore. Live with it, get used to it. And so with that in mind, um, AI, it's entering the picture. How do you see it changing the cybersecurity landscape in your opinion? And this is, your opinion, because I know it's a big
Right.
topic. Is it for the better or the worse, in your opinion? I can argue for both sides because I think
Yeah.
there is some really good stuff about it, but there is also, malicious intentions. We can't deny it. It's part of our daily lives. We just talk about it. AI is making
Yeah.
it easier for bad actors to target businesses, and so we have to be mindful. That's what we're doing here. What's your take on it?
You're nailing it. You're exactly nailing it. Yes, it is making it easier for bad guys to do attacks. At the same time, it's making it easier for good guys to roll out, new counters and new
Yeah.
detection methods. So I see it as another tool. Just like 30 years ago, Excel and QuickBooks were going to get rid of accountants. There were going to be no more accountant jobs anywhere because Excel and QuickBooks were going to take care of that. And right, 30
That
years
didn't happen.
later, right, 30 years later, there's more
Hasn't
accountants than
happened.
ever. And if you talk to any
Actually, they're
accountant,
saying AI is going to take over that job.
right,
But here we
AI is
are.
going to take over that too. Right. But if you talk to any accountant today, not most, a lot of them know how to use QuickBooks, and just about every one of them is a master of Excel.
Of Excel.
And so I see, as far as cyber goes, I see it going the same direction. If you work in the industry, that it's either going to be a tool that's in your toolbox or you're getting ready to retire or otherwise leave the industry, right? It's either something you're going to be comfortable using and it's going to be something you're working with, or you're not going to be in really a lot of industries. Yeah, that's my quick take. I think it's going to take longer than it feels like for that to happen. I like the idea of how airlines use their automated pilot systems in tandem with a pilot and a first officer, right?
Hmm.
We have Tesla has been putting out self-driving cars, and there's been other companies putting that stuff out for a few years. We've had the idea of self-driving planes. That's been around. Autopilot has been around for a long time, but there's still, right, we still have a pilot. And for redundancy,
Yeah.
we still have a first officer. And I think a lot of that's probably the eventual direction that we see
Okay.
with a lot of us, right? Whether we're accounting or whether we're cyber or whether we're marketing or whatever, we either know how to use AI to double, triple our output, and we're the expert, but right, we're still the expert, and
Yeah.
right, the person is
We're
still
still
signing
managing
on,
it.
right. But yeah, I think how pilots work is very similar. That yeah, we might let the plane fly itself for a little bit, but it's never out of the pilot's control.
All right. Okay. Well, we're getting to the end of this one. So if I am a business owner listening to this today and I want to start taking cybersecurity seriously, what is the first step I should take this week to get it going?
A risk assessment, in a phrase.
Okay.
Just take 10 minutes to sit down. And if you were a bad guy attacking your business, how would you do it? Or and especially knowing what you know as the business owner, it's very likely that a lot of business owners can immediately go, yeah, there's this thing I've had on the back burner for 6 months, 6 years, right? This thing, right? Yeah. In a lot of cases, you already know what it is.
Hmm.
And yeah, just take 10-15 minutes, do a risk assessment. And if you say, my brain doesn't work like that, I don't want to take the 15 minutes, then yeah, make a phone call. Either call an
Like somebody
MSP.
else take it.
Yep. Yep, call an MSP, anybody who works in the industry. Most of us, there's a lot of introverts in the industry, but there's a lot of us that once you get us talking about tech, we won't shut up. And yeah, if you get us talking about security side, we're happy to go over a lot of things like that. But yeah, risk assessment would be where I'd start.
Very good. All right, Dan, thank you so much for coming out and talking to me and
Yeah, thank
uh,
you.
our audience. Thank you for being in the show, and I hope to maybe have you again back in the future.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
Awesome. For everybody else, thank you for listening to our show today. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.